The pharmacy receipt in her apron pocket said $1,842. Overdue. My loves, listen to me. Imani Foster was 29 years old, head housekeeper at the Kwan estate in Bel Air, and she carried her 4-year-old daughter Noelle through the service gate at 5:47 in the morning because she had nowhere else to leave her. Aigu. The old butler pulled her aside on the first day. On Sok-jin, gray hair, gold-rimmed glasses, a thin scar down his right cheek. He whispered one rule: never let the child cross into the West Wing. 3 days later, thunder took out the power. Noelle heard something behind an oak door, a grown man crying in the dark. She pushed the door open before her mother could stop her. He lunged from the shadows. 6'3", wrinkled black shirt half unbuttoned, a koi tattoo climbing his neck, fist raised. Kwon Tae-jin, Snow Wolf, the most feared boss in Koreatown. He froze when the little girl looked up at him. 2 afro puffs, a bunny backpack, and she smiled. Papa! He didn't remember his own name. He didn't remember his empire. He didn't remember the wife and baby he had buried. But Han Sok-jin knelt on that marble floor and whispered something to Imani that turned her blood to ice. And what he said next, my loves, I still don't have the words for it. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Imani Foster climbed the marble steps of the Kwan estate at 5:47 in the morning with her daughter asleep on her shoulder and a folded pharmacy receipt tucked inside her coat like a knife she was trying not to touch. The receipt was for $1,842, 2 months past due. She had been carrying it in the same pocket for 11 days, and every time her hand brushed the paper felt heavier than the child. Noelle stirred once against her neck and went back to sleep. The little white bunny backpack pressed into Imani's collarbone. It had a broken zipper on one side. Imani had promised to fix it 3 weekends in a row. She hadn't. The wrought iron gate had opened for her without a sound. Bel Air did not creak. Bel Air breathed. At the top of the stairs, the front door was already open, held by a man she had not been warned about. Gray hair with a clean side part, gold-rimmed glasses, a thin vertical scar coming down from the corner of his right eye, straight through the cheekbone, like someone had once tried to draw a line to remind him where his face ended. He wore a 3-piece anthracite suit at 5 in the morning. The gold pocket watch chain across his vest caught the entryway light and did not shine so much as measure it. Miss Foster, he said, not a question. Yes, sir. Han Sok-jin, I run this house. He did not offer his hand. He looked at Noelle. He looked at Noelle a beat longer than most men looked at other people's sleeping children. Then his eyes came back up and settled somewhere between Imani's mouth and her throat. Come in. The foyer was a room the size of the apartment Imani was about to lose. White Calicut marble. A staircase that split in 2 and climbed both walls. A chandelier hanging like a frozen storm. Your quarters are on the east wing, Han said. He walked as he spoke, and Imani followed with the child on her shoulder and the receipt in her pocket, and her heels making small, careful sounds she immediately hated. 2 bedrooms, private bath, kitchenette. The child sleeps where you sleep. You do not use the main kitchen after 10 p.m. You do not answer the front door. You do not speak to anyone who arrives after dark, whether they use the intercom or not. Are you following? Yes, sir. Repeat it back to me. She repeated it back to him. Good, Han said. One more. They had reached the mouth of a long corridor that split off the main hall. He stopped there and turned to her fully for the first time. Behind the gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes were not old. Old eyes have softness at the edges. His did not. The West Wing. He raised one finger and pointed down the corridor. just one finger. Steady. You do not enter. Neither does your daughter. Under any circumstance. Imani looked where he was pointing. Double doors at the far end. Dark oak. Closed. The corridor between them and the doors was longer than any hallway had any right to be in a house that already contained too many hallways. Yes, sir. Miss Foster. His voice dropped lower, not louder, lower. Which was worse? Say it back. I will not enter the West Wing. My daughter will not enter the West Wing. He held her eyes another half-second, and then he was already walking again, and the moment was closed like a drawer. Imani followed. She did not look back at the corridor. She could feel it behind her the way she could feel the receipt in her coat. Noelle woke up in the East Wing kitchenette. The child sat up on Imani's hip, blinked at the marble and the copper pans, and the coffee machine that looked like something a spaceship had left behind, and said, very calmly, Mama, are we rich now? No, baby. But this is our house. We work here. It's different. Noelle considered this. She fingered the ear of the bunny backpack. Do rich people work here? Rich people live here. We make it nice for them. Okay. Noelle slid down off her hip and walked across the room in her socks. She stopped at the window. Mama, there's a pool. I saw. Can I? No. Okay. Imani started the coffee. Her hands were steady. Her hands were always steady when the money was worst. It was one of the small horrors she had come to know about her own body, that it grew calmer the closer she came to losing everything. On the counter, she laid out the day's schedule Han's assistant had emailed her at 3 a.m. 19 staff, 2 chefs, a groundskeeper who came in from Culver City, a pool man on Thursdays, a woman named Vivian Whitlock who ran the agency Imani had signed with, was listed under the heading, External Contacts, Do Not Contact Without Permission. Vivian's name had a small gold star next to it in the printout. Imani did not know what the star meant. She suspected she would find out. She did not see the master of the house on the first day. She did not see him on the second day. On the second night, Han met her in the kitchenette at 11:10 with a manila envelope in his hand. Your first paycheck, he said. Advance. 2 weeks. Imani took the envelope. The weight of it told her what was inside before she looked. She looked anyway. Bills. Fresh from the bank. She could smell the ink. Sir, my contract says bi-weekly direct deposit. Your contract says whatever I say it says, Han said pleasantly. The address on the pharmacy receipt in your coat, the neurology clinic on West Adams. You are 3 days from collections. Yes. Her mouth went dry. How did you? I read. His eyes went to Noelle, who was asleep on the little sofa by the window with the bunny backpack under her cheek. The child. What's the diagnosis? Absence epilepsy. She has... Imani stopped. Corrected. She had 6 seizures last year. The medication controls them. Without it she has more. Yes, sir. The medication is expensive. Yes, sir. Han nodded once. He was not writing anything down. He did not need to. The advance is yours. There will be another envelope on Friday. The child's medication will be delivered to the East Wing pantry starting tomorrow. 3 months supply, restocked automatically. She held the envelope with both hands. Mr. Han. Yes. Why? He looked at her over the top of the gold rims. It was the first time she got the full weight of his face without the filter of the glass's upper edge. The scar came alive in that light, ran from the corner of his eye down to just above the mouth. Someone had cut him a long time ago, and someone else had sewn him back together in a hurry. Because you are going to do exactly what I tell you, Han said. For as long as I tell you, without asking why, starting now. Yes, sir. Good night, Miss Foster. He left. She stood in the kitchenette with $14,000 in cash in her hand and looked at her daughter breathing on the sofa. Then she walked to the sink and turned on the tap and put her mouth under the cold water, because the alternative was to make a sound she could not afford to make in this house. The third day was a Thursday. The third day was the thunder. It came in off the Pacific at 4:15 in the afternoon, black and sudden, the way weather did not usually come in Los Angeles. The gardener packed up. The pool man never showed. By 6, the sky was the color of an old bruise, and by 7, the wind had started to move the palm trees, the way wind moves things it does not respect. Noelle was in the East Wing sitting room, drawing on the back of a room service menu with a green crayon. Imani was folding towels. The house lights flickered once at 7:02, held, flickered again at 7:09. At 7:11 the power went. The generator was supposed to catch inside 3 seconds. Imani knew because she had read the house manual on her first night. It did not catch. She stood in the dark holding a folded towel and counted. 5, 6, 7, 10. The lights did not come back. Somewhere in the house something fell over. Somewhere further, a door slammed. Then the wind put its shoulder against the west side of the estate, and the whole building answered with a low structural groan that Imani felt through the marble under her feet. "Mama, I'm here, baby. Stay where you are. Mama, it's dark." "I know." She found the flashlight on top of the refrigerator. Little rubberized thing, Bel Air pretending to be Wyoming. She clicked it on. The beam found Noelle sitting cross-legged on the rug with the bunny backpack in her lap, big eyes and no tears. 4-year-olds who have had 6 seizures do not cry at the dark. "Mama, someone's crying." "No, baby, that's just the wind." "No, it isn't." Imani listened. Under the wind, under the low structural groan, under the small pings of the house cooling in the storm, there was a sound she had not heard before and did not want to hear now. A man, somewhere on the other side of the house, not shouting, not calling, a low, broken sound that came in short waves and did not stop. "Mama!" "Stay here. I want to see." "Noelle, sit down." "But he's sad, Mama." "Sit down." She sat. Imani turned the flashlight toward the door of the sitting room, then toward the corridor, then back. Han's voice came up in her head very clearly. Under any circumstance, she could feel the shape of the receipt in her coat. She could feel the shape of the $14,000 in her drawer upstairs. She could feel the shape of her daughter's medications stacked in the pantry. She could also feel the shape of the sound. "I'm going to look at the fuse box," she said. "You sit here. You do not move. You do not follow me. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mama." "Say it. I do not move. I do not follow you." "Good girl." She left the flashlight with Noelle. She took the small candle from the kitchenette drawer. She lit it with a match. She stepped out of the east wing into the main hall. The main hall in the dark was not the same room she had walked into 3 mornings ago. The chandelier was gone in the black above her, and the marble under her feet gave every sound back doubled. Her heels she had left in the kitchen. She moved in stocking feet. The candle flame bent every time the house breathed. The sound was clearer now. It was not from the east wing. It was not from upstairs. It was coming from the mouth of the corridor she had promised Han she would not enter. She stopped at the mouth of that corridor, and she stood there, and she made herself breathe. Under any circumstance, she thought, I could turn around. She thought, I have not yet done anything I cannot undo. She thought about the receipt. She thought about the pantry. She thought about the small silver brooch pinned to her apron, and the way Han had looked at Noelle a beat too long in the doorway on the first morning. She thought, he already knows me. Whatever this house is, it already knows me. Turning around is not a door that is still open. She was still thinking when Noelle's socked feet came around behind her in the dark. Mama, Noelle. Her voice came out low and flat and did not sound like her voice. I told you to stay. I heard him again. Noelle, go back. He's really sad, Mama. Noelle. The child had already started walking. 4 years old, in the dark, in a house she had known for 3 days, walking toward a sound she should not have been able to hear over the wind. Imani reached for her wrist and missed. The candle went sideways in her hand. Wax dripped hot onto her knuckles. She hissed. Noelle, come back right now. Noelle did not come back. Noelle walked the length of the corridor in the almost dark, like she had walked it 100 times before, small hand skimming the wall for balance, the bunny backpack bouncing softly against her spine. Imani followed, and every step she took, she felt something in her chest opening that she had spent 32 months trying to keep closed. At the far end of the corridor, the oak doors were closed. The crying had stopped. Noelle put both small hands on the wood. Noelle, do not. Noelle pushed. The door was not locked. It opened inward, on a hinge so quiet the wood might have been floating. A wedge of black on black on black. The room inside smelled of old candle smoke and cold sweat, and something bitter Imani could not name. The candle in her hand threw about 6 feet of light and no more. 6 feet of Persian rug, the corner of a low table, a bottle, tipped on its side, empty, a wristwatch, black-faced, sitting flat on the floor beside the bottle, as if someone had taken it off and set it down deliberately, like a period at the end of a sentence. Then the sentence moved. The shape came up off the floor faster than Imani could translate what she was seeing into a word for what she was seeing. 6'3" of him, at least, coming out of the black in a low crouch that was already halfway to a strike. A right fist, cocked and rising. Wrinkled black shirt hanging open across a chest she could not have described if her life had depended on it. The neckline of the shirt torn back on one side and up the left side of his throat, climbing out of the collar into the light of her candle, the long black inked body of a koi carp, scales sharp as coins. The fist came up to the height of her jaw and stopped. Not because Imani had said anything. Imani had not made a sound. Her mouth was open. Her mouth had been open for what felt like an hour. The fist stopped because Noelle stepped forward into the 6 feet of candlelight, tilted her head up with the total unimpressed calm of a child who had already seen worse than a strange man in a dark room, and smiled at him. "Papa!" The word rang off the marble behind them, and came back and rang off the marble again. The man in the dark did not move. His fist did not lower. His fist did not rise. He stood in the exact half-second of the strike he had almost thrown, and his face, what Imani could see of his face in the yellow of the candle, was doing something no face was built to do. The jaw was locked, the mouth was open just enough to show teeth. The eyes, almond-shaped and very dark and wet at the corners, were looking at Noelle the way a drowning man looks at a rope. Then the eyes came up off Noelle and found Imani. He did not know her. That was the first thing she understood. He did not know his own face in a mirror. His pupils were blown out with something more terrible than drink. Under the koi tattoo, the pulse in his neck was going too fast and too shallow. On his forearms, she could see the bandages, half unwrapped, and the recent scars underneath, pink and shining, and older scars underneath those, silver and quiet. He looked at Imani. He looked at Noelle. He looked back at Imani, and his mouth moved twice before any sound came out of it. He did not finish. The fist finally came down, slowly, all the way down. It hung at his side and shook. Behind Imani, in the corridor she had promised not to enter, the flashlight beam of Han Sok-jin turned the corner and steadied on the 3 of them in the doorway. Han did not shout. Han did not run. Han walked, at the same unhurried pace he had walked her to her quarters on the first morning, and stopped exactly 1 step behind Imani's shoulder. "Miss Foster." His voice was so quiet, the candle did not flicker. Do not move, do not speak, do not let the child move. The man in the dark had not taken his eyes off Noel. Han Seok-jin, three-piece suit, gold-rimmed glasses, thin vertical scar catching the candlelight, took one small breath. Then, without lowering his voice at all, he said, in Korean, 3 words Imani did not understand and did not need to understand. The tone was enough. The man in the dark answered in Korean, 1 word, rough, torn out of him. Han answered back, 2 words. The man in the dark looked at Imani, then at Noel, then, very slowly, he went down onto one knee on the Persian rug and put the heel of his right hand, the fist that had almost hit her, against the middle of his own forehead and pressed it there, and did not move. Han turned to Imani in the corridor. He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with one finger. His eyes behind them were not old. Behind them, at the corner, the scar caught the candle again. Miss Foster, he said, pick up your daughter. She picked up her daughter. Take a step back. She took a step back. Now smile at him. What? Smile at him. Now. She smiled. Whatever her face did, she smiled. The man on the rug, forehead pressed to his own knuckle, breathed out once. His shoulders came down 1/2 inch. Han moved between them and closed the oak door with one gloved hand. Then he turned to Imani in the dark hallway, with the flashlight beam pointing straight down at the marble between their feet, and when he spoke he did not raise his voice at all. You are going to listen to me now, Miss Foster. You are going to listen the way you have never listened to anyone in your life. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good, Han said, because starting in the next 30 seconds, everything you thought you were doing in this house is going to change. And if you make one wrong move between now and morning, that man behind that door will kill you and your daughter before the sun comes up, and he will not remember doing it. Noelle put her small hand flat against her mother's cheek. Mama, she whispered, Papa's sad. Imani did not answer her. She was looking, over Han Seok-jin's shoulder, at the closed oak door, and at the thin, steady line of candlelight leaking under it, from a candle that had not been burning when they walked in. Han followed her eyes to the strip of light on the marble. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked back at her, and something behind the gold-rimmed glasses shifted a quarter turn, the way a lock shifts before it catches. He lit that, Han said quietly, before you came down the corridor. That's not possible. No, it is not. She held her daughter tighter. Noelle's small breath moved against her collarbone in the steady rhythm of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of a room she had chosen to walk into. Under the door, the line of light held. It did not flicker. It did not shift. It waited, the way a man waits who has just remembered, for one blind second, something he was never meant to remember again. Han Seok-jin looked at Imani over his glasses. Come with me, he said, now, while he is still uncertain who he is. Imani stepped back from the door. Noelle turned her small face into her mother's neck and did not look at the light on the floor again. Behind them, under the oak, the candle went on burning by itself. Han Seok-jin was waiting for her at the bottom of the marble stairs before the sun found the windows. He had not slept. The vest was buttoned, the pocket watch chain caught the first gray of the morning, and his hands were folded in front of him, the way an executioner folds his hands when he wants to look like a butler. Miss Foster, it's early. It is late, he said. Come with me. Imani did not move. Noelle was still asleep upstairs in the staff wing, tucked under 2 blankets, the bunny backpack beside the pillow, like a small guard dog. Imani had left the door open exactly 4 fingers. She had counted them. I have to go back up in 10 minutes. You have 5. He turned and walked. She followed, because there was nothing else to do. The house at that hour felt drained, as if something had bled out of it in the night and taken the color of the walls with it. They crossed the East Gallery, the long corridor with the black and white tiles, the small library where the fire had gone out. Han opened a door she had not seen before. It gave onto a study, lined with dark wood, and one single window covered by a heavy drape. He closed the door behind her. "Sit." She sat. He did not. "Whatever happened last night," he said, "did not happen. Do you understand?" He called her Papa. He did not. "Mr. Han." He said a word, in a language he does not remember. It meant nothing. He looked at her like she was Miss Foster. He lowered his voice, and the lowering was worse than a shout would have been. "If you speak of what you saw last night to anyone in this house, if you speak of it to your church, to your mother, to the pharmacist you owe money to, I will know, and you will not know how I know. Do you understand?" She understood. Good. He walked to a small side table and poured himself something from a crystal decanter. It was tea, not liquor. He drank it standing up. "There is a second matter. I'm listening." He will ask for her. Imani's hands closed on the arms of the chair. Today, perhaps tomorrow, he will ask where the child is. He will ask why he cannot find her. He will ask for her by a name that is not her name. What name? Han did not answer. He set the cup down carefully, as if it were made of something more fragile than porcelain. "You will bring her." "I will not." "You will bring her. You will let him see her. You will let him hold her if he asks, and you will not correct him. He's a mafia boss. He had a fist raised over her head last night." He had a fist raised over an intruder in the dark. He did not touch her. He will never touch her. But if he wakes tomorrow and remembers who he is, before he remembers who he thinks she is, we will all die in this house before noon. She stared at him. He stared back. There was no cruelty in his face. There was only the tired precision of a man who had been arranging other people's survival for so long he no longer noticed the weight. "You are asking me to lie. I am asking you to keep breathing. The lie is included." "Why me?" His eyes shifted, just once, toward the drape over the window. Just once, and back. "Because you were available." He walked her out. At the door he stopped. "Miss Foster, welcome back, Mrs. Kwan." He did not smile. "If he remembers you are not family, he kills you both. Rehearse the face you are going to wear." She walked upstairs. Her legs were steady. She did not know how. Noelle was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, arranging the bunny backpack's zippers in a straight line. She looked up. "Mama," the man downstairs cried. "What man, baby?" "The tall one, the sad one, in the dark room." Imani sat down on the floor next to her. She did not answer for a while. Then she said, "Baby, if a man asks you your name today, tell him Noelle. But if he calls you something else, don't fight him. Just smile, okay? Like a game? Like a game. Okay." Noelle went back to the zippers. Imani watched her small hands work and thought about the receipt in her wallet, $1,842, and the neurologist who had said the enzyme was buying them time and nothing else. And she thought about the way the child had said Papa, in a voice that had never said that word before in her life. She rehearsed the face. By 9 that morning, she was in the West Wing. She had told the daymaids to strip the north bedrooms. She had told Park Do-yoon, the young one with the tiger on his forearm and the bandage still on his shoulder, that she needed the West Wing door unlocked for airing. He had looked at her a long time. He had unlocked it. The room behind the oak door was not the horror she had built in her head. It was worse, because it was clean. Blackout drapes on every window, a single low bed made with military precision, a basin, a pitcher, a folded towel. On the wall, 3 photographs turned face down. On the nightstand, a small, unlit oil lamp. And in the corner, seated on the floor with his back against the wall and his forearms crossed on his knees, was Quan Tae-jin, bare feet, black shirt wrinkled from having been slept in, sleeves rolled to just below the elbows. The koi carp climbed the left side of his neck and vanished under the open collar. He had shaved. The cut on his jaw was fresh. He looked up when the door opened, and for 1 second there was the animal, the coiled thing that had jumped in the dark. Then he saw her, and something in his shoulders came down half an inch. "You are the wife," he said. It was not a question. It was a man testing a word he had been told to use. "Yes." He looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he looked at her hands. "Where is she?" "With the housekeeper, downstairs." "Bring her." "In a while, she's eating." He accepted this. He accepted it in a way that told her he had been arguing with himself before she opened the door and had lost. "Sit down." She sat on the low stool by the basin. She kept the door behind her open exactly 4 fingers, the way she had left Noel's door open in the night. Habit, insurance, small superstition of a woman who counted things. "I don't remember your name," he said. "Imani." "Imani." He said it slowly, as if he were rolling a stone in his mouth to see if it was smooth. "Imani. That is not a Korean name." "No." "How did we meet?" She had prepared a story on the stairs. She discarded it. Han had said do not correct him. Han had not said invent. "You don't have to remember today," she said. "Today you rest." He almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "You are very calm for someone who is married to me. I have practice." He looked at her for a long time. Then he lifted his right hand, slowly, the way a man lifts a hand he does not entirely trust, and held it out palm up, halfway across the space between them. It was an invitation and a test. She looked at the hand, scarred knuckles, fresh bruise along the second finger, a thick black watch on the wrist, a hand that had killed men and did not remember doing it. She put her hand in his. She let him close his fingers around hers. He closed them very carefully, as if he had been told her bones were breakable. "Your hand is cold," he said. "The house is cold. I know." He did not let go for a while. He held her hand and looked at the floor and breathed like a man trying to remember how breathing worked. When he released her the way you release a bird you have been asked not to crush. "Bring the child," he said. She stood up. At the door she paused. "Tae-jin." He looked up sharply. Nobody had called him that in weeks. "Don't come out yet. Wait for me." "I will wait." She walked back down the corridor. Her hand was still warm. She would not admit this to herself for 3 more days. Noel came up the stairs holding Imani's hand and holding the bunny backpack against her chest and singing very softly a song about a duck that Imani had taught her when she was 2. At the oak door, Imani knelt and straightened the pastel ribbons on the 2 puffs and said, "Remember, it's a game." "Okay." She pushed the door. He was standing this time. He had put on shoes. He had buttoned 1 more button of the black shirt, badly, so it hung crooked at the collarbone. When Noel stepped into the room, he did not move. He looked at her the way a man looks at a photograph he has been carrying folded in his wallet for years without opening. "Ha-a-un," he said. Noel looked up at Imani. Imani smiled the face she had rehearsed. Then Noel walked across the room, dragging the bunny backpack by 1 ear, and stopped in front of him and lifted both arms. He knelt. His knees hit the wood so hard Imani flinched. He gathered the child against his chest with the arms of a man who had not touched anything gentle in a very long time. He put his face into the crown of the 2 afro puffs. He did not cry. He breathed. Long, slow, shaking breaths, as if he were drinking her. Noel patted his back with a small flat hand. "You were sad in the dark room," she said. "Yes. You should not be sad." "No." Imani stood in the doorway with her fingernails cutting half-moons into her palms. Han Sok-jin was somewhere behind her in the corridor. She did not look for him. She looked at the top of Kwon Tae-jin's head, at the koi climbing his neck, at the 4-year-old hand patting the shoulder of a man who could have snapped that hand off at the wrist without breathing hard, and she felt the walls of her small, careful life quietly begin to shift on their foundations. The trap had closed. She had walked into it, holding her daughter's hand, and the worst part, the part she would not say out loud until much later, was that the trap was warm. For 3 days after that, the house changed shape around them. Han moved Imani's things from the staff wing into a suite 2 doors down from the west wing. He did it while she was in the kitchen and did not ask her permission. When she came upstairs and saw her folded uniforms stacked on a bed the size of her old apartment, she stood in the doorway for a full minute before she stepped inside. Noelle ran past her and bounced twice on the mattress and declared it a boat. Park Do-yoon was assigned to their door. He stood at parade rest in the hall from 6 in the morning until midnight, and another man Imani did not know took the night shift. Park did not speak to her for 2 days. On the 3rd day, when she came out with Noelle's breakfast tray, he said quietly, "Ma'am, the child does not leave the house, not the garden, not the driveway. Anywhere she goes, I go. Do you understand?" "I understand." "And ma'am," he looked past her, at nothing. "He sleeps at night now. He was not sleeping before. Thank you." She did not know how to answer that. She nodded and walked on. Tae-jin ate with them. He ate very little at first, and then more. He asked Noelle questions about the bunny. He learned the bunny's name was Mr. Carrot. He treated Mr. Carrot with the same grave courtesy he would have shown a visiting head of state. Noelle decided within 48 hours that he was hers. She climbed him. She fell asleep on his chest during a book Imani was reading aloud in the small library. When she woke, she demanded he carry her upstairs, and he carried her upstairs, and Imani followed 3 steps behind and watched the koi tattoo move under the black shirt with the child's weight against it. He did not ask Imani a single question about their past, not one. It took her a day and a half to understand that this was deliberate. He was letting her write it. On the 4th morning, she came down before sunrise to check the kitchen deliveries and found Han Sok-jin in the study with the door open, waiting. "There is something you must see. Now, while she sleeps." He led her down a corridor she had not been down. He opened a door. Behind the door was a small paneled room with a floor safe. He knelt in front of it with the difficulty of a man who no longer knelt easily and turned the dial. He did not hide the combination from her. That, more than anything else that morning, told her the shape of what was coming. Inside the safe, there was a stack of documents, a velvet box, and a black leather album. He took out the album. He set it on the small desk. He gestured. She opened it. The first photograph was a wedding. Kwon Tae-jin, younger, thinner in the face, in a black suit. Beside him, a Korean woman in a white dress, her hand on his arm, her smile, the kind of smile Imani had not seen on a bride in a long time, the smile of a woman who had known this man since she was a child. The date was written in gold pen in the corner. 6 years ago. Imani turned the page. The woman pregnant, standing in a garden, one hand on the belly, Tae-jin behind her with both arms around her, his face against her hair. Imani turned the page. The woman in a hospital bed, exhausted, radiant, holding a small bundle. Tae-jin sitting on the edge of the bed, with one finger being gripped by a hand smaller than a walnut. His face in that photograph was a face Imani had not known his face was capable of making. Imani turned the page. 2 headstones, side by side, fresh earth, the dates matched, mother and daughter, the same day. In the corner of the photograph, blurred, the edge of a black coat, a man kneeling. She closed the album very slowly. His wife, she said. Ji-woo. She was 31. The child was Ha-eun. She lived 19 minutes. 19 minutes. He held her for 18 of them. The doctors could not get her back from him for the last one. It took 4 men. Imani sat down. She had not decided to sit down. Her legs had decided. Han. Yes. Haun. That's the name he called Noelle. Yes. If she had lived, how old would she be? Han did not look at the album. He looked at Imani. 4. The room went very quiet. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck the half-hour. Imani heard it as if from underwater. You knew, she said. Yes. When you called the agency. Yes. You told Mrs. Whitlock to send a woman with a 4-year-old girl. I told Mrs. Whitlock to send a woman with a daughter of the age his daughter would have been, black, beautiful, desperate, owing money. Why black? Because he would never confuse the mother with Ji-woo. He said this with no cruelty. He said it the way a man reads out a specification. He was not to bond with the mother. He was to bond with the child. The mother was the mechanism. Imani stood up. She stood up because if she stayed sitting, she was going to hit him. You used my child. I saved your child. She would have been dead in 6 weeks without the medication your salary here pays for. You know this. You used my child to reset a mafia boss. I used your child to keep this house alive, long enough for him to remember who he is. When he remembers, he inherits an empire. When the empire has an heir who remembers, 300 men keep their jobs, and 4 families in Seoul do not go to war. When he does not remember, Choi Min-jae takes everything by Friday and burns the rest. Miss Foster, I did not have the luxury of ethics. I had a boy in a dark room who was going to walk into the ocean if I did not put something warm in his hands. You could have told me. You would have refused. Yes, then we would both be dead. And Noelle, and him. Now we are all alive. You are welcome. She stared at him. He held her stare. He did not blink. There is one more thing. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a wedding ring, gold, plain. A woman's ring, small. The inside engraved with a date and a Korean character. Ji-woo's. He asked me last night where his wife's ring was. He remembered the ring before he remembered the wife. This is a good sign and a very bad sign. When he asks you for it, you will put it on. No. Miss Foster. No. Then you and the child are out of the house by dark, and I cannot protect what happens on the road between here and the freeway. Choi Min-jae has been watching the gate for 6 days. He has been waiting to know if the wife is real. If the wife walks out the gate carrying a suitcase, he knows. She looked at the ring. She looked at the album. She looked at the door where somewhere down the corridor, a man who did not know his own history was probably sitting on the edge of a bed, waiting for a 4-year-old girl to come find him and tell him about Mr. Carrot. She reached out and picked up the ring. It was warm. It should not have been warm. It had been in a safe. She closed her fingers around it, and she felt, for the first time since the trap had shut, the trap teeth themselves, not the warm part, the metal part, sinking through her palm into the bone. This story had never been about a job or a debt or a sick child. This story had been engineered, one photograph at a time, to place her exactly where she was now standing, holding a dead woman's ring, with a mafia boss 2 corridors away learning her daughter's laugh. She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. Of course it fit. Han Seok-jin closed the safe. The morning after Han Seok-jin closed that safe, Imani woke before the alarm. She had not really slept. She had lain in the narrow bed of the staff wing, with Noelle curled against her ribs, one small hand fisted in the collar of her nightgown, and she had watched the ceiling turn from black to gray to the pale blue of a Bel Air dawn. She had a plan, small, practical, the plan of a woman who cleans houses for a living and knows that the only power she owns is the power to be somewhere else by nightfall. Bag by the door, passports in the inside pocket. Noelle's bunny backpack packed with 2 changes of clothes, the little bottle of children's Tylenol, the photograph of her mother, $3,200 in cash, rolled inside a tampon box at the bottom of the diaper compartment. She had counted it twice in the dark. She would work the morning, she would smile. She would let Kwon Tae-jin sit at the breakfast table and look at her the way he had been looking at her for 6 days, and she would carry the coffee tray with the steady wrist of a woman who had been carrying trays for 11 years. And at 2 in the afternoon, when the staff shift changed and Han Suk-jin drove to the pharmacy in Beverly Hills for the standing prescription, she would take Noelle out through the pool gate, Uber to Union Station, Amtrak to Albuquerque. Her cousin Renee ran a hair salon there. Renee did not ask questions. That was the plan. She dressed Noelle in the peach cotton dress because peach was the color of a child on vacation, not a child running. She tied the 2 afro puffs with fresh lilac ribbons. She kissed the top of the small warm head and she said, "My baby, today we are going to be very good and very quiet." Noelle said, "Is Papa coming?" Imani stopped with her hand on the doorknob. She said, "Papa is sleeping, sweetheart. We do not wake Papa." Downstairs, the mansion was already humming. 2 Filipina maids, polishing the marble of the grand foyer. The Guatemalan cook, rolling out dough for the breakfast pastries. Han Suk-jin, at the console table, in his 3-piece navy suit, gold pocket watch already out, checking the time against the grandfather clock, as if the clock might have lied to him. He looked up when she came down the staircase with Noelle on her hip. He said, "Mrs. Kwon, good morning." She said, "Good morning, Mr. Han." He watched her cross the foyer. He watched the child cross the foyer. Nothing in his face moved, but the gold pocket watch closed with a soft click, and he slid it back into the vest pocket, and Imani understood, with the small, precise clarity of a woman who has been reading rooms since she was 12 years old, that he had noticed the way her free hand was closed around the strap of the diaper bag, the way the strap was already over her shoulder at 6:15 in the morning. He noticed everything. She carried Noelle into the breakfast room and set her in the tall chair by the window, and she began to butter a piece of toast the way she buttered a piece of toast every morning, and she did not look at Han Suk-jin again. Tae-jin came down at 7:40, barefoot, wrinkled black shirt, 3 buttons open, hair still damp from the shower. He walked into the breakfast room, and he stopped in the doorway, and he looked at Noelle, and something in his face softened in a way Imani had begun to recognize and to fear in equal measure. He crossed to the table and he sat down beside the little girl and he said, in the low, careful voice he used only with her, "Aigu, peach today," Noelle said, "Peach today." He picked up the small hand and he turned it over, and he looked at the palm as if he were reading a book, and he kissed the center of the palm once, and he put the hand down. Imani poured his coffee. Her wrist was steady. Inside her chest, everything was a bird throwing itself at a window. He said, without looking up, "Mrs. Kwon." She said, "Yes." He said, "Sit with us." She sat. She sat across from him with the coffee pot still in her hand, and she watched him tear a piece of toast in half and hand the smaller half to the child, and she thought, one more meal, and then the pool gate. He said, "Tonight I am taking you to dinner." She said, "Oh." He said, "The 2 of you. There is a place in Malibu. A friend of mine owns it. Very quiet. Noelle can order pancakes." Noelle said, "Pancakes." Tae-jin said, "Pancakes." He smiled at the child. The smile was a real thing. It reached his eyes. It was the smile of a man who had not smiled in months and had forgotten that his face still knew how. Imani said, "That is very kind, Mr. Kwon. But Noelle has been coughing. I think tonight I should keep her home. He looked up. The smile did not go away. It only became still, held, like a photograph. He said, "Of course." Another night then, he went back to his toast. Han Suk-jin, who had been standing in the archway of the breakfast room the entire time, turned and walked back into the foyer without a word. At 9:15, Imani carried the breakfast dishes into the kitchen and passed them to the cook and walked out through the service corridor and stopped in the small pantry between the wine cellar and the laundry. She leaned her forehead against the cool plaster of the wall, and she breathed. Just breathed. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. The way the nurse at the clinic had taught her when Noelle was 2 months old and would not stop screaming. She had almost done it. She had almost said yes to dinner. She had almost let him take her to a restaurant in Malibu and order pancakes for a child who was not his child, and she had almost, in the small dark room at the back of her own head, wanted to go. That was the part that frightened her. Not the gun she had not yet seen, not the safe she had not been shown. The wanting. She straightened. She smoothed the apron. She walked to the linen closet on the 2nd floor to fold the towels for the guest suite, because folding towels was what a head housekeeper did at 9:30 in the morning, and if she was going to walk out of this house at 2 in the afternoon, she was going to walk out of it having folded the towels. She was on the 3rd stack when she heard the front gate buzzer. Not the delivery buzzer, not the tradesman buzzer, the main gate, long, insistent, 3 times in a row. She stopped folding. She went to the window of the linen closet, which looked down over the circular drive, and she pulled the sheer curtain aside with 2 fingers. 3 black Escalades were coming up the drive. They were not slowing at the guardhouse. The guardhouse was empty. The gate arm was up. The lead Escalade stopped 10 feet from the front steps, and 4 men got out, and then the passenger door of the 2nd Escalade opened, and a 5th man got out, and Imani, who had never in her life seen the man in the long black leather coat with the thick gold chain and the gold rings on both hands, knew him instantly, the way you know a snake in a garden. She dropped the towel. She ran. She took the servants' stairs 3 at a time, and she came out into the 2nd floor corridor, and she ran past the closed door of Taejin's study, and she flung open the door of the small sitting room, where she had left Noelle with the coloring book and the box of crayons, and Noelle was not there. The coloring book was open on the rug. A crayon was rolling in a slow arc on the hardwood. Imani said, "Noelle." She said it low, the way you say a name when you already know the room is empty. Downstairs, in the foyer, a child's voice said, "Hi." Imani took the front stairs. Not the servants' stairs. The front stairs. The wide sweep of white marble that came down into the grand foyer under the crystal chandelier that Choi Min-jae was standing directly beneath, one gold-ringed hand extended, palm up, toward the little girl in the peach dress who had walked straight up to him because a stranger in a black coat looked interesting and Papa said hello to all his friends. Choi Min-jae smiled. The gold tooth caught the light. He said, in English clean enough to make the accent sound like a joke he was choosing to tell, well. The 4 men behind him fanned out, 2 toward the west wing, 2 toward the east, moving with the easy silence of men who had been in this house before, or in houses exactly like it. Choi crouched down. He put himself at Noelle's height. He tilted his head. He said, "And who might you be, princess?" Noelle said, "Noelle." Choi said, "Noelle." He tasted the name. He straightened. He looked up. He looked directly at Imani, who was on the 7th step from the bottom, with her hand frozen on the marble banister, and his smile widened, and the gold tooth showed all the way, and he said, in the same clean joke of an English, "Ah, there she is," he said. "Come down, sweetheart. Come down and say hello to Uncle Choi." Imani did not move. Choi bent and picked Noel up. He did it in one motion. He did it the way a man picks up a package he has been sent to fetch. His left hand went under the small ribs. His right hand, the one with 3 gold rings, came around and rested against the side of the small head. The fingers threaded gently into one of the 2 afro puffs, the thumb resting lightly on the temple. And then the right hand was not empty anymore. Imani did not see him draw it. The pistol was simply there. Matte black, short barrel, the muzzle pressed against Noel's temple with the same light pressure his thumb had been resting there a second ago. Noel went still, not because she understood, because the man who had been smiling was not smiling anymore, and the metal thing against her head was cold. She said, "Mommy." She said it small. Choi Min-jae said, "Come down the stairs, girl." Imani came down the stairs. Her body did it. Her body walked her down the last 7 steps of white marble in the black uniform, with the crisp white apron, and she came to the bottom of the stairs, and she stopped 4 feet from the man who was holding her child, and she did not scream, and she did not beg, because she had understood in the 7th step that begging was the thing that would end it, and she said, very softly, "Please put her down." Choi said, in a moment. He said, "First we talk." He walked. He walked in a slow circle around her, Noel balanced on his left hip, the pistol still resting against the small temple, and he looked her up and down like a man appraising livestock. He said, "So, this is the toy." Imani did not answer. He said, "Han Suk-jin, that old dog." He walked into the Whitlock agency and he looked through the book and he picked out the pretty black girl with the 4-year-old daughter, and he brought her home, and he dressed her in the wife's clothes, and he told the boss she was family, and the boss looked at her, and the boss looked at the little girl, and something in the boss's broken brain said, "Mine." He stopped in front of her. He said, "Is that what happened, sweetheart?" Imani said, "Please put her down." Choi said, "You are not answering the question." He tapped the pistol very lightly against Noel's temple. Tap, tap. Noel whimpered. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened. Choi did not look up. Choi was watching Imani's face, watching for the flicker of the eyes toward the sound. He got it. He smiled. He said, "Ah, the prince is awake." He raised his voice. He raised it in the pleasant conversational tone of a man calling across a garden party. He said, in Korean, "Snow Wolf, come down, come see what your dog bought you." The footsteps came to the top of the stairs. Imani did not turn. Imani was watching the pistol. Imani was watching the light pressure of the barrel against her daughter's head, and she was memorizing, second by second, the angle of Choi Min-jae's wrist, because the only geometry left in her life was the geometry of that wrist. Behind her, at the top of the marble staircase, Kwon Tae-jin stopped. She heard him stop. She heard the barefoot step arrest on the top stair. She heard the small, sharp intake of breath. Choi looked up. Choi said, in Korean, low and slow, "Welcome back to the world, big brother." Then, in English, for her benefit, he said, "Look at him. Look at that face. He does not even know which one of you is his wife. He does not even know his own name." He tapped the pistol against Noel's temple again. "Tap," he said. "I could take the little one home with me. I have been thinking about it. I could take her home, and I could raise her in the villa in Gangnam, and I could send you the photographs every Christmas. You would open the envelope and you would see her getting bigger, and you would not be able to do a thing. What do you think of that, toy?" Imani said, "Please." She heard it come out of her mouth and she hated the sound of it. Choi laughed. Above them, on the top step, Kwon Tae-jin made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a large animal makes when a bone breaks inside its chest. It was low and it was ragged, and it came from a place the man in the black shirt had not been to in 7 months. Imani turned her head. She turned it slowly, because she did not want to draw Choi's eye, and she looked up the length of the marble staircase, and she saw Kwon Tae-jin on the top step, with one hand braced against the banister, and the other hand pressed flat against the wall, as if the wall were the only thing keeping him upright, and his face was not the face she had been looking at for 6 days. The confusion was gone. The animal vulnerability was gone. Something was coming back into that face in waves, wave after wave, and each wave took a piece of the man she knew and gave her back a piece of the man she did not. His mouth opened. He said, in Korean, very quietly, "The child," he said. "The child in the peach dress," he said. "I dreamed her." Then his knees went out from under him. He did not fall down the stairs. He caught himself against the banister with the animal reflex of a body that had been trained for 20 years to not fall. He went down onto both knees on the top step and he stayed there, one hand on the banister, and he looked at Noel across 40 feet of empty air, and his shoulders began to shake. Choi Min-jae watched him with the pleasure of a man who has bought a good ticket to a good show. Choi said, in Korean, "Remember now, brother. Remember your wife. Remember your baby. Remember the delivery room. Remember the blood on the sheet." Tae-jin made the sound again. Choi said, in English, for Imani, for the room, for himself. He lost them both, wife and baby, same night. She was breech, and the baby came sideways, and by the time they got the boss into the hospital, the two of them were already gone. 7 months ago, he put a bullet in the doctor's mouth, and then he tried to put one in his own, and the security team caught the barrel just in time, and he woke up in this house, not remembering any of it. Choi tapped the pistol against Noel's temple. "Tap," he said, and now Han buys him a replacement family, and the boss looks at the little black girl and he thinks, "Mine," because his brain is broken, and it will take any little girl who is small and warm and calls him Papa. He smiled at Imani. He said, "You are not the wife, sweetheart. You are the sedative." Imani's knees did not go. Imani's knees stayed exactly where they were, because Noel was 4 feet away, with a gun against her head, and Imani was going to be standing when this ended, one way or the other. She said, "Take the gun off my daughter." Choi said, "In a minute." He turned back toward the staircase. He said, "Up, Snow Wolf, on your feet. I want you to watch this properly." Tae-jin did not stand. Tae-jin was still on both knees on the top step, and his hands had come off the banister and off the wall and had come to rest, both of them, palm up, on his own thighs. He was looking at the child. He was looking at nothing else. Han Seok-jin walked into the foyer through the archway from the study. He walked in slowly. He walked in with both hands visible at his sides. He walked in like a man who had been waiting in the next room for the moment when he would be called in, and had been called in. Choi turned his head. Choi said, in Korean, "Ah, the dog." Han said, in Korean, "Choi." Choi said, in Korean, "You sold us out to a corpse. You knew he could not sign the transfer if he could not remember his own name. You bought a black girl and her puppy to keep him alive long enough for the paperwork." Han said nothing. Choi said, in Korean, "Where is the album?" Han said, in Korean, "In the safe." Choi said, in Korean, "Get it." Han did not move. Choi lifted the pistol away from Noel's temple. He pointed it at Han. He held it there for 1 second, 2. He lowered it, back to the small head, back to the light resting pressure. He said, in Korean, "Get the album, old man, or I take the little one out through the front door, and you spend the rest of your very short life listening to your boss ask you where his daughter is." Han turned. Han began to walk toward the study. At the top of the stairs, Kwon Tae-jin's right hand closed slowly around the marble spindle of the banister. His knuckles went white. Something in his eyes had finished coming back. His knuckles went white. Something in his eyes had finished coming back. Choi Min-jae felt the shift before he understood it. The gold tooth caught a slice of chandelier light as his mouth opened halfway, a word half-formed and never spoken. The pistol was still pressed to the small, warm temple beneath the afro puff. Noelle had stopped breathing through her mouth. Her small fingers had found the hem of Imani's dress and closed around it. 3 fingers, then 4, the grip of a child who does not know she is holding on for her life. Tae-jin came down the stairs. Not fast, not slow. The way water finds a lower level. Barefoot on white marble, black shirt unbuttoned to the sternum, the koi carp on his neck sliding out from under the collar with every step, the tattoo alive in the light. His face had emptied of the confusion that had lived in it for weeks. What replaced it did not have a name in English. Han Sok-jin, still on his knees near the console table, made a sound in the back of his throat that was almost a prayer. Choi laughed. It was the wrong sound in the wrong room. "Look at this," he said. "Look who woke up." Tae-jin did not answer. He reached the bottom stair and did not stop. He crossed the entrance hall in 8 measured paces, and every man in the room adjusted the grip on his weapon and did not fire. Because Choi had not given the order, and because the room had already understood, before its owners, that the order would never come. "Snow Wolf," Choi said. "The gold tooth again. You remember your own name yet, Oppa? Or do we have to teach you?" Tae-jin stopped 4 feet from him. His eyes went to Noelle first, to the barrel against her skin, to the small tremor at the corner of her mouth, then to Imani. He held her there for 1 full second, and Imani, who had believed her body had run out of things to feel, felt one more thing, and could not have named it either. Then he looked at Choi. "Take it off her." 2 words. His voice had come back the way the rest of him had come back. Lower, quieter, unhurried. Choi's smile widened. Or what? Tae-jin's hand moved. Not toward a weapon, toward the child. Palm open, fingers extended. The gesture a man makes to a horse that has been running. "Noelle." The girl looked up, her lower lip pushed forward, the way it always did when she was about to decide something. She looked at her mother. Imani did not nod. Imani did not move. But something passed between them in the marble silence, and Noelle stepped sideways, out of the pistol's shadow, into the empty space between Choi and Tae-jin. 2 of Choi's men flinched. Their guns rose an inch. The safety on the nearest one clicked off with a small metallic word. Tae-jin lifted her. He lifted her the way a father lifts a child who has fallen and is pretending she has not. 1 arm under her legs, 1 hand supporting the small, bony back, her cheek finding the shirt where the top button was open, her ear finding the place under his collarbone where his heart was. She did not cry. She wrapped her fingers around the koi tattoo on his neck, as if it were a piece of rope thrown down a well. He passed her to Imani without looking. Imani took her, her arms locked around the small body with a violence that had nothing to do with fear anymore. Tae-jin's hand, briefly, brushed the base of Imani's neck as the transfer completed. Once, not a caress, a confirmation. Then it was gone. He turned to Choi. "You put a gun to a child." Choi shrugged. The shrug of a man who has done worse things in better rooms. "Business, Snow Wolf. She's not yours." Tae-jin tilted his head half an inch. In the old days, in Seoul, in the rooms that had rugs thick enough to swallow shell casings, this tilt had been the last thing 3 men saw. "Aigu," he whispered, almost gentle. "You don't know what she is." The knife came out of his sleeve. Nobody saw where it had lived. It came from the folded cuff, from the wrinkle at the elbow, from some pocket. The tailor of that shirt had not been told about. Choi's pistol swung toward Tae-jin. Tae-jin was already inside the arc. The blade went in under the jaw at an upward angle and stopped when it met bone at the crown of the skull. The gold tooth was still visible when Choi's mouth opened for the last time. The pistol fell first, then Choi. The blood found the seam between two marble tiles and traveled along it like it had been given a map. Imani had turned Noelle's face into her shoulder. The child's small hand was still around the neck of no one now, closing on air. Two of Choi's men raised their weapons. Park Do-yoon came in from the west corridor. Nobody had heard him. Nobody ever heard him. The tiger tattoo on his forearm caught the light as his own pistol rose. The bandage on his left shoulder had bled through. He had been on the estate the whole time. Taejin had not sent for him. Taejin had never needed to. Down, Do-yoon said, in Korean, once. Choi's men put their guns on the marble. The sound of 8 pieces of metal touching stone almost at the same instant was the sound of a decision being made across a room without a single word of debate. Do-yoon's men, in black, came in behind him, 6 of them, then 8. They collected the weapons. They moved the bodies with the quiet efficiency of people who have done this in rooms with better rugs. Taejin had not moved. His eyes had gone back to Han. Han Seok-jin was still on his knees. The gold pocket watch chain glinted against the anthracite vest as he lifted his face. The scar on his cheekbone looked older than it had an hour ago. He did not try to stand. He did not try to speak. He waited, as a man of his generation had been taught to wait, for the word that would decide what remained of his life. Taejin walked to him. He walked past Imani without looking at her, past Noelle, who had turned her face far enough to watch. He stopped in front of Han and did not raise a hand. Uncle. The word landed harder than any blade in the room. Han's mouth trembled, once. He closed it. You chose them, Taejin said, very quietly, out of the Whitlock agency, because of the little one. Han did not deny it. You looked at photographs. You picked the child that was the same age. You picked the woman who would look right, at the edge of the frame, in a house with the shape of a family. Han's eyes closed. When they opened, they were wet. You did this, Taejin said, so that when I woke up, I would want to keep something, so that I would not disappear into the Han River, so that the empire would not shatter and take you with it. Yes, Han said. That was all he said. Taejin looked at him for a long time. Then he crouched. He crouched the way a man crouches at a grave, one knee down, one forearm on the other knee. He was close enough that Han could smell the copper of Choi still on the shirt cuff. You will not die tonight. Han flinched, the flinch of a man who has just been sentenced to something worse than what he had prepared for. You will fly to Seoul. Tomorrow, Do-yoon will put you on the plane with an escort. The council will hear you. They will decide. Han lowered his head until his forehead touched the marble. Uncle. Taejin's voice softened 1 degree. It was almost tender. It was the tone Martha's voice took when she wanted a guest to understand that the sweet would not be available tomorrow. You raised me. I remember. You held my hand at my father's grave. I remember that too. Han's shoulders folded, a dry sob. 1. I remember my wife, Taejin said. I remember the hospital. 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 And told me the door I was not to open. I remember the album you put in my coffer so I would have a face to say goodbye to. Han was crying now, silently. The tears found the scar and ran along it. You gave me a woman and a child so I would not walk into the sea. I understand you, Uncle. He stood. The kindness left his voice the way a light leaves a room. But you put a gun on the child's temple with your silence. You let Choi come through the gate you built. Seoul will decide, not me. He turned away. He walked to Imani. Noelle was watching him over her mother's shoulder. The small fingers reached, before her mind had asked permission, and touched the koi tattoo on his neck. He let her. He held Imani's eyes. Come with me. Imani did not answer with a word. She walked with him. Duyun's men were still working. The marble was being wiped clean. A cell phone somewhere was being crushed under a heel. Han was lifted, without violence, and led away toward a black car whose engine had been running the whole time and which no one had noticed until now. The west wing was quiet. The oak door was open. The bedroom smelled of copper and rain and, faintly, of the peach shampoo in Noelle's hair. Taejin closed the door behind them. He did not lock it. He sat on the edge of the bed. Imani stood. Noelle was still on her hip, half asleep, the way small children fall asleep after they have decided the danger is over, even when it is not. Taejin looked at the child first. He reached, and with 2 fingers, he touched the top of the small ribbon that held the left afro puff. "I dreamed of her," he said, in English. Then, softer, in Korean, "Kumaseo boata." Imani did not speak. 2 puffs, he said, crying in the dark. Before I knew her name, before I knew her face, I dreamed of her. Noelle's breathing had gone deep. "There is a document," he said. His eyes came up to Imani's. "I signed it 3 months before the shot in Cheongdam-dong. A clause. Do-yoon inherits everything. Everything except a fund. The fund is for any child in this house who needs treatment. Any child." Imani's throat moved. She said nothing. When Han put you here, he did not know about the clause. Do-yoon knew. Do-yoon has been watching you for weeks. She turned her face away. He waited. "The neurologist's bill," Taejin said. $1,842. Do-yoon paid it the same night you signed the contract. From the fund. Not from Han. From me. Before I remembered you existed. Imani closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at him with the exhaustion of a woman who has been carrying 2 lives on one back for 6 years and has just been told, gently, to set them down. "Why?" she said. It was not a question. "Because," Taejin said, "some part of me was still awake, even in the dark, and it knew a child was coming." She sat down on the bed, slowly. She kept Noelle against her. "There will be a house," he said. "In Pasadena, in her name, not mine, not yours, hers. $3 million in a fund neither of us can touch until she is 18. A neurologist on retainer. A driver. Papers that make you her only guardian even in the eyes of the state of California. A door that no one from this world can open." He reached into the drawer of the bedside table, the drawer she had opened once, weeks ago, to place a small tray with cold water. He took out an envelope. It was thin. Thinner than the one she had opened at the front desk of the Whitlock agency 6 weeks ago. He set it on the coverlet between them. "And your freedom," he said, "if you want it." Imani looked at the envelope, not at the check she knew was inside, at the envelope itself, at the crease along the top where a thumb had pressed it. She reached out. She took it. She held it for a long moment. Then she put it back on the coverlet. "No," she said. Taejin's chest, which had been holding still, moved once. "No." "What?" he said, very quietly. She looked at him, the full look, the look she had not given any man in 5 years. "No to the freedom that pretends you were never here." She reached, with the hand that was not holding her daughter, and she laid her palm on the koi tattoo, the one Noelle had grabbed like a rope. Her thumb found the pulse under his jaw. "You will be her father," she said. "For real. Not because of a fund, not because of a house in Pasadena, because she calls you Papa, in a room where she thought she was going to die, and you came down those stairs." His eyes closed. "And me?" he said. "Me you have to earn." He laughed. Once, it was the first laugh that had left his chest in 6 months, and it left it quiet, the way a man laughs at the door of a church. "Mark my words," he whispered. It was not one of his phrases. He had borrowed it from somewhere, perhaps from a voice he had heard in a dream, in the dark, before he had a name to put to the woman it belonged to. I will earn it. Noelle stirred. Her eyes opened halfway. She looked at Tae-jin. Papa, she said. Sleepy. Certain. He put his forehead against hers. He said nothing. There was a knock at the door. Do-yoon. Alone. He waited to be told to enter. Tae-jin looked at Imani. She did not move away. He said, Come. Do-yoon opened the door and did not cross the threshold. He carried a leather folio under his arm, and the exhaustion of a man who had been thinking 3 moves ahead of everyone in the house for 6 months. Seoul is on the line, Hyung. Tae-jin nodded. The clause? Read on the fax. Confirmed. Signed. Notarized. And Han? Landed at 4:20 local, Seoul. 2 council members waiting on the tarmac. He asked for nothing. He said 1 sentence when they lifted him out of the car. He said, Tell the woman I am sorry for the child. Imani did not react. Her thumb, still on the koi tattoo, did not lift. Do-yoon looked at her for the first time. In Korean, softly, he said something. Tae-jin translated without being asked. He says, From tonight, he answers to you before he answers to me, on anything that touches the child. Imani looked at Do-yoon. She did not smile. She inclined her head half an inch. The half-inch of a woman who had learned, in 18 months at a Whitlock hotel and 6 weeks in a house of ghosts, exactly what a nod is worth. Do-yoon bowed. He set the folio on the writing desk by the door and left it there. He closed the door behind him without a sound. Tae-jin walked to the desk. He opened the folio. Papers, seals, the red thumbprint of an old man on the last page. He looked at them for a long time. Then he closed the folio and left it where it was. Tomorrow, he said. He came back to the bed. Tomorrow the lawyers. Today, just this. Imani looked up at him. In the low light of the west wing, the koi on his neck looked almost like it was swimming. Say her name, she said. He did not ask which one. He knelt in front of the bed, so his face was at the height of the sleeping child in her arms. He put one hand, very lightly, on the back of Noelle's small skull, in the space between the 2 afro puffs, and he said her name the way he had said his wife's name 6 years ago, in a hospital room he had blacked out of his memory for good reasons. Noelle. The girl stirred. She did not wake. Her thumb found her mouth. Imani's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. She had cried once, at 4 in the morning, in a bathroom in Inglewood, on the last day of a lease she could not renew. She had promised herself, that night, that she would not cry again until she was safe. She was not going to break the promise now. On the last morning of not being safe, 4 minutes before the first morning of being safe. Outside, the black car with Han Seok-jin in it turned onto Sunset Boulevard and did not come back. Park Do-yoon walked the perimeter of the estate one more time and pronounced it clean. In Seoul, 7 hours ahead, a council of old men in a room with no windows read a fax and did not speak for a long time. By 4 in the morning, the marble was as white as it had been when the house was built. By 5, Imani had walked, barefoot, through the west corridor and out the tall French doors to the garden. Tae-jin walked beside her. Noelle rode on his hip now, a small hand still on the tattoo, the bunny backpack forgotten in the bedroom for the first time in her life. The lawn was silver with dew. The sky over Bel Air was the color a sky is only in the 10 minutes before it decides what kind of day to be. A jasmine had opened in the night. Somewhere on the property, a mourning dove began, and then stopped, and then began again. Tae-jin set Noelle down. The child took 2 steps into the wet grass and turned to make sure both of them were still there. They were. She laughed. She ran 3 more steps, chasing something only a 4-year-old could see. Imani stood beside Tae-jin. Her hand found his. Not the way a wife takes a husband's hand. The way a woman closes a door behind herself when she has decided which room she is going to live in. I don't know your name yet, she said. You do. say it. Taejin, Taejin, Taejin. The dove began again. This time it did not stop. Noelle turned to them with a fistful of wet grass held up like treasure. The first ray of sun found the top of her afro puffs and made a small crown of them. The house behind them was already someone else's memory. The garden in front of them was not. She had walked into that mansion at 5:47 on a Tuesday morning with a receipt for $1,842 in her apron pocket and a child on her hip. She was walking out of it with a life. With a man who had come down a staircase in the dark to answer a name he had not yet remembered. With a daughter who had chosen a father before the world could tell her she was not allowed to. With a garden that did not belong to anyone but the three of them, for the length of one sunrise, and that was long enough. The sunrise did not last. Nothing built inside a house like this one lasted longer than the light itself. By 7:40, the marble foyer carried a smell Imani had not smelled in years. Gun oil, cheap cologne, the copper edge of adrenaline that seeps out of skin when a man has decided he is willing to die for money. She was on the second-floor landing with a folded stack of white linens against her chest when she heard the front doors open without being knocked on. She heard boots, 4 sets. She heard Han Sok-jin's voice, low, saying a single Korean word she did not need to translate. The word was danger. Imani let the linens fall. They opened like white wings against the banister and slid down 2 steps. She did not watch them. She walked, and then ran, toward the nursery where Noelle had been playing on the rug, with the bunny backpack open beside her, sorting small plastic animals into a pink lunchbox. Imani was 3 paces from the door when a gloved hand caught her elbow from behind and turned her, hard, into the wall. Her shoulder hit first, her cheek second. She did not scream. She had trained herself out of screaming a long time ago, in a different city, in a different life, when screaming had cost her a job. Downstairs, the man said in accented English. His breath was mint over cigarettes. Now, he was one of Choi's. Leather coat, gold chain, a signet ring cold against her jaw. She did not resist. Resistance would carry them into the nursery. She let herself be walked down the marble staircase, sun bleeding pink across the windows behind her. Halfway down, she saw the foyer. She saw Han on his knees near the console table, gold-rimmed glasses knocked to one side, a thin line of blood at the corner of his mouth. She saw Park Do-yoon flat on the floor by the doorway, one arm folded under him at an angle an arm should not fold. He was breathing. His eyes tracked her as she came down. That was all he could do. She saw Choi Min-jae in the center of the foyer, and Choi Min-jae saw her. "Ah," he said. The gold tooth flashed. The wife. He said the word wife the way another man might say the word prop. Behind him, 4 men in black leather coats stood in a loose fan across the marble. One held Han by the collar. One kept a pistol trained on Park. 2 had their weapons low but not holstered. Choi himself carried a black Beretta with the easy familiarity of a man who had shot people in worse rooms than this one. His scar cut through the upper lip in a jagged white seam. His hair had the streak of white at the temple that Han had once told her, in a rare, unguarded moment, was the mark of a man who had survived a knife meant for his skull. Imani reached the bottom of the stairs. She stopped. She kept her hands loose at her sides. "Where is he?" Choi said. It was not a question. "Sleeping," she said. "Wake him. He does not wake before 8. Choi smiled. It was a small smile, patient, almost fond. The smile of a man teaching a child a lesson the child would only need to learn once. He took 2 steps toward her and put the barrel of the Beretta lightly, almost gently, under her chin. He lifted her face with it. He looked at her the way a man in a market looks at fruit. "You know what I think, wife," he said. "I think you are a very clean woman. Very clean skin, very clean uniform. I think Han Sok-jin went shopping, and he found you at a store called Whitlock, and he paid a fair price. Her jaw did not move. Her eyes did not move. I think, Choi said, softer, that you are a toy the old man bought. Han said something sharp in Korean from the floor. One of the men kicked him in the ribs and he folded. Choi did not look away from Imani. Say it, he said. Say what you are. She said nothing. Behind Choi, from the west wing, a door opened, not loudly. Just the sound of a door letting go of its frame after being held closed for a long time. Choi heard it. He did not turn. He watched Imani's face for the flicker that would tell him who had come out. She gave him nothing. She had spent 5 years learning to give strangers nothing across the front desks of hotels she could not afford to stay in. A small voice said, "Mama?" Imani closed her eyes for 1 second. One only. Then she opened them and looked at Choi, and she said, very calmly, in the tone of a woman confirming a room reservation, "She is 4. I can see," Choi said. Noelle was standing at the top of the staircase in a mint green dress, the 2 afro puffs slightly loose on one side from sleep, the white bunny backpack on her shoulders, as if she had been in the middle of packing for a trip that only she knew about. She held a small plastic giraffe in her left hand. She saw the men. She saw her mother against the barrel of a gun. She did not scream. She did not run. She did the thing that 4-year-olds sometimes do when the world stops making sense. She went very still and looked at her mother's face to find out what her own face was supposed to do. Choi Min-jae lowered the beretta from under Imani's chin. He turned. He walked, slow, up 3 steps of the staircase, then 4, then 5. He stopped 1 step below Noelle. He crouched. He put his forearms on his knees, the way a friendly uncle crouches to meet a niece at an airport. His coat pooled behind him on the marble. "Hello, little bunny," he said in English. Noelle did not answer. Her small hand tightened around the giraffe. "Do you know," Choi said, "that your papa upstairs used to work for me?" Choi. Han's voice from the floor, torn, thin. "She is a child." Choi ignored him. He tilted his head at Noelle. "Do you know what your papa did for me?" Noelle looked past him. She looked down the stairs at Imani, and Imani did the only thing a mother can do in that second. She smiled. Small, steady, the way she had smiled 1,000 mornings across 1,000 breakfast tables when the rent was late and Noelle was watching to see if the world had ended. Noelle read that smile the way she had learned to read it. She did not move. Choi rose out of the crouch. He climbed the last step. He put one hand on Noelle's small shoulder to turn her toward him, and then he lifted the beretta, casually, the way a man lifts a phone to check the time, and he pressed the barrel against Noelle's right temple, just at the edge of the soft baby hairs at her hairline. "Say it now," he said, and this time he was not looking at Imani anymore. He was looking at the second-floor landing behind Noelle, where the door of the west wing had opened wide. Kwon Tae-jin was on the landing. He was barefoot. He wore the black Egyptian cotton shirt, the top 3 buttons open, the sleeves rolled to just below his elbows. His right hand hung empty at his side. His left hand was flat against the doorframe, fingers spread, as if the frame were the only thing keeping him upright. The koi tattoo on his neck moved once when he swallowed. His eyes were on his daughter. Not the housekeeper's daughter, not the pretend daughter. His daughter, because that was the only word his face was making at that moment, the only word his body would allow. "Choi Min-jae," he said. His voice was hoarse from 3 months of a room that had no windows. It was still a voice men in this country had once obeyed. "Take the gun off the child." "Ah," Choi said. He smiled. The gold tooth caught the pink light. "The dead man walks. Take the gun off the child. You will pay a price for her, boss?" Tae-jin did not answer with words. He took 1 step onto the marble of the landing, his knees folded under him halfway through the step, and he went down. Not the collapse of a man who had been shot, the collapse of a man whose head had suddenly filled with 3 years of weight at once. He caught himself on one hand. His forehead touched the cold marble. Choi laughed. It was a low, delighted laugh. "You see, wife," he said, without turning. "He does not even remember his own name." But that was not what was happening on the landing. What was happening on the landing was that Kwon Tae-jin, forehead against marble, was remembering. The smell of a Seoul hospital corridor. The sound a monitor makes when the line goes flat. The weight of a bundle of white cloth in his forearms that had been warm for 10 minutes and then was not. He was remembering his own signature at the bottom of a document his lawyer had begged him not to sign, 3 years ago, a clause transferring the empire to Park Do-yoon if Tae-jin fell, with a subclause that a fund would remain in perpetuity for any child in the Kwon household who needed treatment. He had signed it drunk. He had signed it because his wife and his baby had been 3 days dead. He was remembering a dream from the West Wing, a small girl with 2 puffs of hair crying behind a door he could not open. In the dream, the girl had opened it, not him. 47 seconds. That was how long Tae-jin knelt on the marble with his forehead on the floor, while 3 years of his life came back in a single tide. 47 seconds is not a long time. It is short enough that Choi Min-jae did not think of it as a delay. It is long enough that a man can decide who he is going to be for the rest of his life. Tae-jin lifted his head. His eyes were dry. His eyes were also not the eyes of the man who had lived in the West Wing for 3 months. Something behind them had come back into its correct alignment. Quietly, the way a shoulder slips back into its socket, he looked at Choi Min-jae the way a butcher looks at a hanging carcass, not with hatred, with familiarity. "Do-yoon," he said. From the floor by the front doors, Park Do-yoon lifted his head 1 inch. He was bleeding from the mouth. He said, in Korean, "Yes, Hyung." "Left ankle," Tae-jin said. Park did not answer. He did not need to. His left hand crept toward his left ankle where a small snub-nose revolver sat in a leather holster inside his sock. A revolver Tae-jin had made him wear every day for 6 years. A revolver Tae-jin himself had gifted him at a New Year's dinner in 2019, with the words, "Never sit in a room without a second gun." Park's fingers touched the grip. Tae-jin stood. He stood the way a man stands who has not stood at his full height in 3 months. Slowly, in stages, the muscles remembering their job in the order they had learned it. Thighs, hips, back, shoulders, neck. When he reached his full height on the landing, 1.92 meters, he was 2 inches taller than Choi Min-jae standing on the step above Noel. "Choi," he said, and now his voice had come back all the way. "Look at me." Choi turned his head. The beretta stayed against Noel's temple, but his eyes met Tae-jin's, and in the second that they met, something in Choi's face flickered. It was the flicker of a man who realizes he has been kneeling at the wrong altar. He had been paid by someone in Seoul who had assured him the snow wolf was gone, that the man in the West Wing was a shell, that Han was ready to sell. Choi saw the flicker in Tae-jin's eyes and he understood, in the exact way a hunter understands 1 second too late that he is the one being hunted, that he had been sold bad information. He tried to speak. He did not get the chance. "Do-yoon," Tae-jin said, without looking away from Choi. "Now." The snub nose came out of the ankle holster. Park could not lift his arm to shoulder height. The shoulder was wrong. He lifted it to hip height. He aimed with the flat certainty of a man who had drilled for the moment he could not stand up. He fired once. The bullet went through the wrist of the man holding Han. That man dropped Han. He also dropped his own weapon. The pistol clattered onto the marble. Han Sok-jin was on the floor near the console table. Han Sok-jin was old, and he was bleeding at the mouth. But Han Sok-jin had lived through 4 wars in 3 countries, and Han Sok-jin's hand closed around the dropped pistol before it had finished spinning. He came up on 1 knee. He fired twice. The 2 men with weapons still drawn went down before the sound of the second shot had left the marble. 4 seconds. That was how long the room took. Choi Min-jae's beretta was still against the temple of a 4-year-old girl. Tae-jin walked toward him. He walked across the landing on bare feet, without hurry, the way a man walks toward a door he intends to close for the last time. He stopped 1 step below Choi, on the same step where Choi had crouched to speak to Noelle. He held out one open hand. "Give it to me," he said, in Korean. Choi's finger was on the trigger. Choi's eyes were wide. Choi understood, now, with total clarity, that if he pulled the trigger on the child, he would not leave the house. He also understood that if he lowered the gun, he would not leave the house either. He was in the small square of a chessboard, where every square around him was on fire. He did what men in that square usually do. He tried to bargain. "Boss," he said. His voice had lost the smile. "The order came from Seoul. It was not my—" "Give it to me," Tae-jin said. Choi looked at the child. Noelle was looking up at Tae-jin, not at Choi, not at the gun. She was looking at Tae-jin with the total, unquestioning trust of a 4-year-old who had, 3 days earlier in a dark room, decided that this was her father. Her small hand was still around the plastic giraffe. Her small chest rose and fell once. Choi lowered the beretta from her temple. He turned it, slowly, and placed the grip into Tae-jin's open palm. Tae-jin took the weapon. He handed it, without breaking eye contact with Choi, backward across his shoulder. Somewhere behind him, Han Suk-jin's old hand received it. Then Tae-jin picked Noelle up. He did it the way a man picks up something he has been waiting a long time to be allowed to hold. One arm under her, one hand at the back of her head. The small afro puff pressed against his open collar, just below the koi tattoo. She wrapped her legs around his waist, as if she had been doing it for years. Her small breath went warm against the skin of his neck. He turned. He walked down 2 steps. He handed her, carefully, into the arms of her mother at the foot of the stairs. Imani took her without a word. Her hands were shaking. Her hands had not shaken during the barrel under her jaw. They shook now. Tae-jin looked at her over Noelle's head. There were things he could have said. There were 3 years of things he could have said. He said none of them. He touched her cheek once, with the back of 2 fingers, and turned back toward the stairs. He climbed. He stopped 1 step below Choi Min-jae. He said in Korean, whose name was on the order from Seoul. Choi's mouth opened. Choi's mouth closed. Choi looked, for 1 second, at Han Suk-jin bleeding at the console table, with 2 pistols now in his hands, and then Choi looked back at Tae-jin, and Choi understood he had 1 card left to play in his life. He said the name. He said it clearly. He said it twice. Tae-jin nodded once, as if hearing something he had already suspected. He did not thank Choi. He held out his hand, backward, over his shoulder again. Han Suk-jin placed the beretta into it. The last thing Choi Min-jae saw in his life was the koi carp tattoo on the left side of Kwon Tae-jin's neck. The shot went between his eyes. He fell back down the 2 steps he had climbed. He landed at the bottom of the staircase, 1 arm across his chest, the gold tooth catching the pink light 1 last time. Tae-jin turned. He looked down at Han Suk-jin, who was still on 1 knee near the console table, glasses crooked, blood at the corner of his mouth, both pistols now lowered. Han Suk-jin, Tae-jin said. Han lifted his eyes. On your knees, Tae-jin said. Both of them, hands on the floor. Han placed the pistols on the marble. He moved down onto both knees. He put his palms flat on the cold stone. His head bowed. He said nothing. Tae-jin walked down the stairs. He walked past Choi Min-jae's body without looking at it. He stopped in front of Han. He looked down at the old man whose gold-rimmed glasses were fogging slightly from the shallow way he was breathing. You brought a woman and a child into my house, Tae-jin said. His voice was very quiet now. It was more terrifying quiet than it had been loud. You used them. Han did not lift his head. Do not speak yet, Taejin said. I have not decided what to do with you. He turned. He crossed the foyer. He stopped in front of Imani, who was standing at the newel post with Noelle wrapped around her. He did not touch her this time. He looked at Noelle. Noelle looked back at him. Little one, he said in English. Noelle put out her small hand and touched the koi tattoo on the side of his neck, the same tattoo she had touched 3 nights ago, in the dark of the West Wing, when she had opened the door he could not open. Papa, she said. He did not answer. He could not, yet. He put his forehead against her small forehead, briefly, and closed his eyes. Behind him, in the marble foyer of a house that had just decided who it belonged to, Han Sok-jin was still on his knees on the cold stone, and the sunrise that had promised a garden for 3 had turned, without asking anyone's permission, into the first morning of a longer war. Park Do-yoon was the one who moved first. He crossed the foyer in 6 steps, his black Chelsea boots ringing against the marble, and stopped a meter behind Han. He did not look at the older man. He looked at Taejin, at the top of the stairs, and waited for the sign. Taejin gave it without lifting his voice. Take him to the cellar. Keep him breathing. The council in Seoul is going to want him with a pulse. Do-yoon nodded once. He bent, closed his hand around the back of Han's collar, and lifted him from the marble, the way a man lifts a stray dog from wet pavement. The gray suit did not resist. The gold pocket watch chain slipped from the vest and swung against Han's ribs. He let it swing. His small, cold eyes finally found Imani's, across the foyer, and for the first time since dawn, there was something in them that was not calculation. It was closer to shame. She did not give it back. They disappeared through the service corridor. The door clicked shut. The house exhaled. Choi Min-jae's body was still on the floor between the couch and the low table, one gold ring catching the light from the tall east window. 2 of Do-yoon's men came in through the kitchen with a folded canvas and moved without instruction. They lifted him the way porters lift luggage, knees, shoulders, weight balanced, and carried him out through the same corridor Han had gone through, only lower, quieter, without a collar. The gold tooth was not visible anymore. Someone would clean the marble before the sun cleared the wall. Imani had not moved. She was still on the second-to-last step of the grand staircase, Noelle pressed against her collarbone, the small bunny-shaped backpack squeezed between them. Noelle's cheek was flat against her mother's neck. Her eyes were open. She had not cried. Something in the girl's silence was more finished than tears. Imani felt it in the way the small hand held onto the shoulder of her uniform. Not fear, grip. Taejin came down the stairs. He moved slowly, not because he had to, because he had decided that everything from this moment on would move at a pace a 4-year-old could follow. The black Egyptian cotton shirt was still wrinkled from the night in the West Wing. The koi on the left side of his neck disappeared under the collar and climbed back out at the collarbone. His large right hand was open at his side. The pistol was already gone. He had passed it to Do-yoon on the landing without a word. 3 steps from the bottom he stopped. He did not come closer. He crouched, one knee on the marble, so that his eyes were lower than the child's. Noelle, he said. The girl turned her head against her mother's neck. One eye, then the other, then the small round mouth working, deciding. Are you the man from the dark room? She said. Imani felt her own breath stop. Taejin held the child's gaze. He did not smile the way strangers smile at children. He did not perform. I am, he said. I am also the man who was not going to hurt you. Noelle considered this the way small children consider large questions. Her fingers tightened on the strap of the bunny backpack. Then she released, one finger at a time. She did not reach for him. She did not have to. What she gave him was smaller and more expensive than a hand. She gave him her eyes and kept them there. Okay, she said. That was all. Taejin closed his eyes for 1 second. Only one. When he opened them, he was looking at Imani. He stood. "Come with me," he said. "Both of you. There is something I need you to see before anything else in this house is decided." Imani did not answer with words. She stepped down the last 2 steps. Noelle did not ask to be put down. She rode on her mother's hip, the way she had ridden through the whole dawn, the whole night before, the 3 weeks before that, the whole life she could remember. Tae-jin led them through the east corridor, past the library, past the door of the room she had cleaned every morning for 21 days without ever setting foot inside. He did not open that door. He walked past it as if it were furniture. He stopped at the last door on the right, the one Han had told her, on her first afternoon in this house, was the private office and was not to be entered under any circumstance by staff. He turned the handle. He held the door open. He waited for her to go in first. The office was not what she had imagined. The desk was black walnut, wide and simple. There were no photographs on the walls. There was one steel filing cabinet in the corner and a low leather chair beside it. The window looked out over the rose garden, which at this hour was still full of shadow. On the desk, in the exact center, was a manila folder. It was not new. The corners were soft. It had been handled. "Sit," he said. Imani sat in the leather chair. She kept Noelle on her lap. The child rested her chin on her mother's forearm and watched Tae-jin the way a small animal watches a larger one that has decided not to be dangerous. Tae-jin did not sit. He picked up the folder. He opened it and turned it toward her. Inside was a single document, printed on heavy legal paper, 22 pages long. The top sheet carried a gold seal she did not recognize, and, below the seal, 3 lines of Korean characters and their English translation. Amendment to the Kwon Family Trust. Dormant clause activated on the date of my incapacitation. She read the first paragraph, then the second. Then she stopped reading and looked up. "You signed this before," she said. "Before the ambush. 2 years ago," he said. "Han was in the room. He witnessed it. He is the reason this clause exists. I did not trust him even then. I did not know why. I trust myself more now." She looked back down. The clause named Park Do-yoon as sole operational successor of Kwon Holdings, the legal skin over everything else, in the event that the primary was declared unfit, missing, or memory impaired for more than 72 hours. Below that, in its own paragraph, was a subclause she read twice. A perpetual trust, fully sealed and independent of Kwon Holdings, to be administered by an external law firm in Zurich, whose sole beneficiary was, the phrasing was carefully generic, any child residing in the household of the primary, at the time of activation, who requires, or may in future require, continuous medical care. Continuous medical care. Imani's hand went to Noelle's back and stayed there. "I did not know her," Tae-jin said. His voice was low. "I signed this before you ever walked through the gate. I do not remember why I chose those exact words. I remember I had been having the same dream for 11 nights. A girl I could not see, crying in a dark room. 2 round shapes on her head. I told myself it was grief. I told myself it was my own child. I put the words in the document anyway." Imani did not speak. "When I woke up on that floor 3 nights ago," he said, "and she was standing in the door of the West Wing, and she called me the word I have not been called in my life. I did not remember anything else. I remembered that." He closed the folder. He did not put it back on the desk. He set it in her lap, on top of Noelle's leg, so that the child had to lift her small hand and put it on the paper to hold it in place. "The trust is already funded," he said. "It has been funded from the day I signed it. Zurich has been holding it. What Han did, bringing you here, choosing you the way he chose you, was theft. Not of money, of the reason I wrote those words. He turned a promise I had made in the dark into a leash he could pull. That is what I will answer for to the council. Not the killing downstairs. That." Imani lowered her eyes to the folder in Noelle's small hand. "Why are you showing me this now?" she said. "Because in 10 minutes, I am going to offer you something, and I do not want you to think it is charity, or a bribe, or a way to close a door. It is not any of those. It is a door being opened that was already open before either of us knew the other existed. I want you to know that before you decide." He walked to the window. He looked at the roses that were not yet in sun. His broad back, the shirt still creased along the shoulder blade, blocked the pale light for a moment. Then he turned around. "There is a house in Pasadena," he said. "It is not mine. It has never been in my name. It belongs to the trust. 3 bedrooms, garden, a pediatric neurology clinic 4 miles away that takes the insurance the trust will pay for you. The deed is ready. The name on it will be yours. Only yours. $3 million in an account you control, separate from the trust, so that no man in a suit ever explains to you what you can and cannot spend on your daughter. And Noelle's care, every appointment, every medication, every therapy, for as long as she lives, the trust in Zurich pays. It cannot be revoked, not by me, not by anyone with my name." He stopped. "And you walk out of this house today, if that is what you want, and you never see me again. Duyun will drive you. He will make sure no one from the world I live in ever finds your address. That is what I am offering. That is the door." Imani did not answer for a long time. Noelle, in her lap, ran her small palm over the gold seal on the top of the folder, as if it were the head of a very quiet animal. "You would let us go," Imani said. "Not a question." "I would. Even after—" She looked at the folder, at the words continuous medical care, at the 11 nights of dreaming. "Even after that. Especially after that," he said. "A promise made in the dark is not a claim. It is a debt. Debts are paid without asking the person you owe to stay in the room." The office was quiet. Somewhere in the house a door closed softly. The morning was still coming. Imani looked at her daughter. Noelle was watching Tae-jin. Not the way children watch strangers. Not the way she had watched him on the second day, from behind her mother's leg. She was watching him the way she watched her mother tie a ribbon in her hair. Carefully, patiently, with the certainty that whatever came next was going to be all right. Imani had known that look on her daughter's face exactly once before. She reached out. She took the folder from her lap. She closed it. She stood up. She walked to the desk, and she set the folder in the exact center where Tae-jin had first taken it from, and she put her palm flat on top of it. "I do not want the check," she said. Tae-jin's expression did not change. He waited. "I do not want the house in Pasadena. I do not want to walk out of this door with an address that no one from your world will ever find. That is a very kind door, Mr. Kwan. It is a door for a woman who does not know what she saw in this house. I know what I saw." She lifted her hand from the folder. "I saw a man who kept a promise to a child he had not met yet. I saw my daughter 3 nights ago walk into a dark room and come out of it not afraid. I saw a man on his knees in the marble downstairs, and I saw who he was on his knees too. And I saw you come down those stairs, and I saw where you put your knee first." Noelle, on her hip, had put her small hand around the strap of the bunny backpack and was holding on to it the way she used to hold Imani's finger in the crib. "The trust for her, you cannot take that back. I understand. I accept it. Not because I am owed, because she is. That was done before I ever met you, and it will outlive both of us. That is not a gift. That is a fact." She looked at him. "The rest, the money, the house, the driver, the address no one can find, you can keep. My daughter has a father who died before she was born. She has never called any man by that word except one. I am not going to take her out of this house, because I am afraid of what people will say about the woman who stayed." She did not raise her voice on any of it. The guest relations trained voice, the 21 days of yes, Mr. Han, and yes, Mrs. Whitlock. All of it was still there in her mouth. She was still a woman who knew how to keep a house running. She just was not any longer going to keep it running on anyone else's terms. Tae-jin lowered his head, not in relief, not in triumph, in something older. The way a man lowers his head when a door he had opened for a stranger turns out to have been opened for someone he already knew. "Then stay," he said. "Not as staff, not as the wife Han invented, as what you already are." "And what am I already?" she said. Her voice, for the first time that morning, had a small crack in it. He looked at Noel. He looked at Imani. He said the word once, in Korean, so low that Imani felt it more than heard it, and then he said it again in English, plain, for the child. Family. Noel looked up at her mother. "Mama," she said, "can we have breakfast now?" Imani let out a sound that was half a laugh and half something she had been holding for 21 days. "Yes, baby," she said. "We can have breakfast now." Tae-jin held the office door open for them. Imani did not go through it first. She waited. He walked through beside her. They went down the east corridor together, past the door of the room she had cleaned for 21 days without entering, past the library, into the kitchen where the light from the garden was now on the copper pans. He set water for coffee. He asked Noelle what kind of eggs she liked. She said scrambled and no green things. He said no green things. Imani sat at the long oak table with her daughter on her lap and watched a man who 3 nights ago had swung a fist at a shadow in a doorway crack 4 eggs into a bowl with hands that had killed a man in her foyer less than an hour before, and she did not look away. She did not have to explain any of it to herself. She would explain it later, in her own time, in her own words, to no one but the mirror. That was the deal she made with herself, sitting at that table. The world would come and ask her how, and why, and what did you think you were doing, and she would smile the smile she had learned in the hallways of the hotel her mother had cleaned in Alabama, and she would tell the world what the world needed to hear, and the truth she would keep. She had kept larger truths than this for smaller reasons. They ate at the long table. Noelle got jam on her chin. Tae-jin, without thinking about it, reached across with a folded linen napkin and wiped it. The small hand did not flinch. Imani watched the koi tattoo climb out from under his collar as he leaned across the table, and she thought, once, briefly, in the private country of her own head, this is how it happens. Not in the moment the door opens, in the moment someone reaches for the jam on the chin. Do-yoon came in through the kitchen door. He did not sit. He said, in Korean, that the car for Seoul was ready and the council had confirmed. He said, in English, for Imani's benefit, that the house was clear, the marble was clean, and the West Wing was being aired out. The West Wing, Tae-jin said. Lock the door, not with a key. Have a wall built. I don't want it to be a room anymore. Do-yoon nodded. He left. After breakfast, Imani stood, Noelle on her hip, and walked out of the kitchen into the garden. The sun had cleared the eastern wall. The roses were red for the first time since she had arrived. Tae-jin followed at a distance. He did not stand beside her. He stood 2 steps behind, the way a man stands who knows that the woman in front of him has decided everything and is now only choosing where to put her feet. Noelle wriggled to be let down. Imani set her on the flagstone path. The girl walked to the nearest rose bush, put both small hands behind her back the way her mother had taught her, and bent forward at the waist to smell the flower without touching it. The 2 afro puffs caught the light. The pastel ribbon on the left one was slightly crooked. It had been crooked all morning. Imani had not fixed it. She looked back at Tae-jin. Mark my words, she said. Quiet, to herself mostly. The first time she had used those words out loud in her own life. The 3 of us are going to be all right. Tae-jin did not answer. He did not need to. In the garden, on the flagstone path, a 4-year-old girl in a peach dress with a bunny backpack at her feet stood between a black American head housekeeper, who was no longer a head housekeeper, and a Korean man with a koi carp climbing his neck, and the morning that had promised a longer war chose, without asking anyone's permission, to be, first, a garden for three. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever cleaned another woman's house, my loves, while a dangerous man watched from the top of the stairs and mistook your child for his own? Have you ever torn up a check big enough to change your life because love had already changed it more? Mark my words, some fathers aren't born, they're chosen in the dark. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about chosen family, hidden memory, and quiet redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.